Okay, well, why don't we get started, everybody, as people are continuing to join the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm Fritz Hurst. I'm NERC's Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs, and together with Hugo Perez and Will McCurry, we manage NERC's engagement with the states and the provinces. We are also joined today by colleagues from the 6 regional entities, and collectively with NERC, we form the Electric Reliability Organization Enterprise for North America. We are independent resources for reliability and security of the grid. And in addition to engagements like this, we would invite you to continue to reach out to us individually if we can be of any assistance to your commission or organization. So we do have a large group today. So we're going to ask that all questions be received through the chat feature. Will McCurry will moderate the questions, and we will hold questions to the end, but we will invite you to please submit those questions as we go along. I would also like to call your attention to the NERC antitrust compliance guidelines, which is shared in the chat. If there are any questions, please contact our General Counsel, Sonia Hosha. And please also be advised that while this meeting invitation was shared only with people from the US states and Canadian provinces, participants should keep in mind that the listening audience may include members of the press, industry stakeholders, and others. I'd also like to note that the webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly on NERC's YouTube site so others may benefit from the content. So in conclusion, I will just simply turn it over to my colleagues at NERC and CERC, beginning with NERC's Director of Reliability Assessment and Performance Analysis, John Morrow. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Fritz, and good to see and be with everybody here this afternoon. Today's webinar is entitled Beyond Borders, and really what we want to do here is update you all on the Interregional Transfer Capability Study, which is a mandated study by the U.S. Congress, which requires NERC to study interregional transfers, and we'll describe where we are in that. But what I'm going to do first is kind of go a little bit through the agenda, table set a little bit, talk a little bit about the state of the grid, and of course the ERO that supports some of these emerging challenges that we see in some of our other products. And then we'll talk and kind of start with the why. We'll go into some of the what in terms of the project, which is really around defining the scope of the project and the objectives of the study work. We'll have Saad go through that, and then kind of go through some of the how, which includes our coordination and consultation with industry. That's a main requirement of the mandated study, and talk a little bit about our stakeholder engagement, and Gaurav will lead that part. Hope to be with you for the next about an hour and get some question and answers in. So let's go right into it so we can kind of get to the meat of the presentation around the ITCS. Next slide. So I know we have a lot of maybe new folks that don't know about NERC. So let's go to the next slide. Very briefly, and there's a whole history book around NERC that's available on the NERC website that'll really go into detail. But you know, for those who don't know, we do have a start that kind of all stems back to the 1960s when we had the first blackout in the Northeast, and then fast forward after a number of outages, a organization that was NERC that really kind of started as a committee really started to form, and we started to develop early versions of standards, which were called guidelines at the time, and it was really best practices for operating, because we do have these interconnected system, and really having rules of the road and understanding how systems operate interconnected in an interconnected fashion reliably. It was really important to interconnection reliability, and of course we do have authority under the Federal Energy Power Act, which requires the formation of the ERO, that's NERC in the regions, and ultimately in 2007, and since then, NERC has been the Electric Reliability Corporation. And let's go to the next slide. And really since then, we've been working to develop our program and our mission. which is to ultimately assure the effectiveness and efficient reduction of risks to the reliability of the and security of the bulk power system in North America. And we do that with a variety of different programs. Some of those are standards, and so the development and enforcement of mandatory standards. And so we have about over 100 standards, even more requirements, and they range from everything from how we communicate, how operators should communicate, are required to communicate, how transmission is planned. We also do assessments, and so that's really the role of my organization here at NERC, which is really around the kind of some near-term and long-term assessments, and we'll get into that. We also certify system operators, making sure that they have necessary skills and knowledge. We also have situation awareness, so we're always monitoring the grid and have capabilities to convene and monitor situations that threaten reliability. Then another part of NERC is really around our security and both physical and cybersecurity monitoring and information sharing, and that's our ISAC, our Electricity Information Sharing and Analysis Center. So the next slide. This is the NERC and the 6 regions. Again, we operate as an ERO, and I think that's for this particular study, I think what's really important is because of the way in which we operate, what I like to call undercarriage. You might hear me talk about when I like to mention this project is there's a lot of existing undercarriage and infrastructure and how the NERC and the regions work together with the industry, building models, validating models. That already happens, and for a study like this that kind of requires a system-wide view, wide area view of reliability, large transfers between areas, that infrastructure is really helpful to get this project kind of off the ground really quick and get industry engaged. And we'll talk more about that later. Next slide. Our program looks backwards, and so we look at performance of the system. We're always monitoring different aspects of the system: generator outages, transmission outages. Move into event analysis. Those are specific one-time events. Might be large, might be a small but interesting type of event, and so we put a deep focus, forensic focus, if we need to, on large events. Like I talked about, that situation awareness aspect, looking at real-time, near real-time conditions on the grid. And then our reliability assessments, which this study really kind of falls into, which is looking at the future, looking at what the future risks are to the system, and understanding based on what energy resources we have, the demands on the system, and the transmission we have on the system, what are the risks, and what level of risk our system's at. So the next slide. So that really feeds into, I think, really setting the table for the study, which is, if you look at the last 10 years and you've been following along with our long-term reliability assessments and really all our assessments, we've seen more risk on the system over the last years and quite significant in more recent years. If you look at the resource mix on the left, you look at the whole system, we've actually reduced the amount of capacity on the system. We built a tremendous amount of wind and solar and even gas. When you look at peak capacity and the types of resources that we built, net compared to each other, we actually have a decrease. And then kind of if you go to the bottom of the slide, you see the demand changes over that same time period, 2012 versus 2022, a 3% increase over the last 10 years. And then if you actually fast forward that, looking in the future, it's a 3% every year almost in certain areas increase. So the increase in demand in the future is incredible. And so it's kind of no surprise you've seen some of these risk maps where we're describing high and medium and kind of maybe normal or lower risk. You never have no risk. but we've identified more and more areas. The risky areas are getting wider. There's more of them. And so this is really important, right? Because as more areas become risky themselves, meaning they're tighter on resources, they each have less resources, they're each more reliant on each other, especially during extreme conditions. And so, and that used to be, neighbors used to rely on each other in the past and were able to access maybe resources that were unaffected by whatever was plaguing certain systems, right? That was a big benefit of having interconnected system, was to rely on your neighbors. As we're finding out, let's go to the next slide. In more recent times, those neighbors no longer have that excess resource that they once did. And so this is a graph that shows the amount of hours that system operators across the bulk power system are initiating load shed events, really. And this is kind of saying the system has reached its breaking point, and the operators must initiate firm load sheds to preserve the supply and demand on the system, preserve reliability. And this value should be close to zero most years. And in fact, if you extend this back to probably all the way to the early 2000s, it's very close to zero. And so more recently, we've seen these firm load sheds that have really extended significant hours. Has really been a challenging impact to reliability. Next slide. A couple more examples of the interconnected, relying on our neighbors. A couple of recent examples. On June 6th, this graphic is showing the ERCOT wind output. But if you actually looked at an area from the Rio Grande all the way to Saskatchewan, and you counted all the wind generation installed in that area, there's about 60 gigawatts of installed wind capacity. And this is the graphic is the ERCOT portion, and you kind of see where that wind kind of goes down to close to zero. But if you look at that whole area, it was 300 megawatts of output out of 60,000 megawatts, 60 gigawatts. So the system survived. We didn't shed any load, but that was because it was June 6th. There was access to resources on the transmission system. That's the value we can have, and we're going to see more of that. And we have to be able to design systems to be able to withstand these types of wind events. They will happen again, right? And building more wind in this area wouldn't have necessarily solved this issue, right? So we need to be able to access resources that are perhaps further from where local weather events are happening. On the bottom is a very similar example, and it's taken out of the PJM Winter Storm Elliott report, where it showed how PJM had to curtail. That's kind of the gray area you see right in the middle, that had to curtail its support to its neighbors in the South TVA, and ultimately resulted in firm load shedding to quite a bit of extent in TVA service area. Again, more reliance on our neighbors during extreme conditions. Next slide. So the futures emerge, and these challenges emerge, and we look at how much future resources are coming in, tons of wind, tons of solar, but what we don't see is the transmission that really needs to come along with it in order to integrate it and make it reliable. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Saad Malik. Saad, you want to introduce yourself, and please go ahead and tell us about how that fits into the study. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, John, for setting the stage here. Hi, everyone. My name is Saad Malik. I'm the manager of transmission assessments at NERC. I report to John Mora. So let's go to the next slide. As John mentioned, the Interregional Transfer Capability Study is a congressionally mandated study, and there are specific requirements in there, and I'll talk about those. But we before we began our study, it was really important for us to have this conversation around what are our guiding principles when we do the study. It's one thing to go through the motions of doing the actual analysis and calculate numbers and produce a report, but it's really what we wanted to make sure that we have right are what are our guiding principles. And so what you're seeing on the screen is some of the things that we discussed, and we put ourselves so that we're always aligned to this North Pole when we are performing the analysis and creating the report and communicating our results. Uh, and again, as John mentioned, performing reliability assessments is an obligation that we have as a electric reliability organization. So performing a study of transmission system North America wide is right in line with that obligation. And this is a little bit of an unprecedented thing that the Congress directly coming forward and directing NERC to perform this analysis. So it shows the importance, how important it is. We have been talking in our reliability circles about the need for transmission, but really, it shows that at the highest level of our government, the need is being recognized. So these are, on the screen you see there's 6 guiding principles that we came up with. Um, when we performed the analysis, we wanted to be an independent analysis and it to be an objective analysis. When planning studies are done, oftentimes there are preferences, there is, different viewpoints that have to be reconciled. So we, as an ERO, have the benefit of being an independent organization. We don't have the skin in the game as far as the transmission or generation is concerned. So it's really an independent look at the entire system. And then the next is system-wide perspective. In our context, it doesn't get any bigger than this. Like when we say system-wide, it's really system-wide, meaning the entire transmission system of North America. So it just doesn't get any bigger than that. Then the next was, reliability. That's our swim lane. Again, when planning is done, system planning is done, there could be a number of different factors that could be in play. Cost could be a factor, policy, environmental, regulatory, other factors. Our focus is reliability. So the outcome of this analysis is with that lens, that it's a reliability lens that we have used for this analysis. Collaboration and coordination is really, really key because it's mandated as part of the legislation that we seek input from the 6 regions in North America, as well as the transmitting utilities, the people that are involved in transmission planning and operations, all of those. So that's a key component of our analysis. Strategic planning. So that basically is referring to that we don't want to create a report, a study that we generate and then it goes on the shelf and collects dust. We want it to be an analysis, objective analysis that entities that are involved in transmission planning or system planning in a broader sense could use for their planning effort. Like it would really become an input into their planning efforts. And we want it to be a repeatable process so that it's not a one-time done deal, that we do the study and then we're done. The intent is that for NERC to continue to do this analysis, like John mentioned, NERC's long-term reliability assessment. Typically, historically, that has focused more on the energy side of things, but in going forward, because transmission is such an important component of reliability, we want to integrate transmission into that assessment, so that we can have a more broader, holistic look at reliability. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a high-level timeline. One of the things that was very, very clear in the legislation was that the deadline is 18 months. So from the time the legislation was signed on June 3rd, the deadline became December 2nd of 2024. So that's our deadline to finish the work. We are about 1/3, a little more than 1/3 of the way through the study work, the project. Right now, at this moment, the gray highlighted areas, we've passed that time frame. So we've done a lot of those initial activities to brainstorm ideas and come up with a strategy on how to do this work, unprecedented work, and do it right. But yet at the same time, we don't stretch ourselves so thin that we're not able to do the core analysis and study work more effectively. We're looking at completing the analysis by the summer time frame, that July, August time frame, and then having the report submitted to FERC before December 2nd. I mean, that's really our plan, is to not wait till the last minute to submit the report, but give ourselves plenty of time to have the report prepared, so that it's communicating to the right audiences and in the right way, and then we are able to also seek input and guidance from our stakeholders. Let's go to the next slide. So before I talk about how we're doing the study, I think it's important that we cover a basic fundamental concept, which is the transfer capability. So what is transfer capability? So it's the amount of electric power that can be moved or transferred from one area to another area of the interconnected system by way of transmission lines. In the normal course of operations, system operations, one region may send power to another region, or may import power from another region, and that happens for various reasons, including economic reasons. But then if the system conditions get tight, the transmission plays a very key reliability role. That if a region is facing a shortage of energy, a neighboring region might be able to help by way of that transmission. And the transfer capability really defines or determines how much energy can be imported into a region from another region. And we'll walk through an example. So let's go through go to the next slide. So what you're seeing on the screen is two areas. So there is, on the left you have area A, and then on the right there's area B. These are two separate transmission planning areas, regions, whatever you want to call it. There is some amount of load generation and imports in area A, and then there's also some amount of load generation and exports that are happening in area B. The yellow bar is kind of representing the load. The green is generation, and imports is the blue on the left. And then the arrows, the two arrows in the middle are intended to represent the transmission system that connects area A and area B. And they each have a certain transfer capability. So going from area A to area B is those two blocks that you see in there represents the transfer limit from A to B. Whereas the four blocks is the limit going from area B to area A. The arrow heading on the from right to left, that arrow has is the transfer capability from area B to area A. So it's a normal day. It's a normal system conditions. Area A has slightly higher load than generation, so it's importing a little bit from area B. And area B has plenty of generation to support that and plenty of transfer capability to support the exports that it needs to make from going from area B to area A. So everything looks good. So let's go to the next slide. Now suddenly you're say for example you're hit with an extreme condition. Say maybe it could be a cold snap, for example, really cold system conditions. So those conditions have a double whammy effect on the system. So if you look at area A in this picture, there are two things that are happening here. One is that area A load has gone up. And the second thing is that area A generation is not at the same level where it was before. I know it's a little bit small on the screen there, but hopefully you're following along. So there's increased load for area A, reduced generation for area A. So the gap between the demand that it needs to meet and whatever local generation it has gotten bigger. So now it needs more imports. So, and area B has been impacted by the same weather. It's got slightly less generation, but it still has sufficient amount to supply to area A. But what's limiting is that it can only send the four blocks. That's the maximum. That's the transfer limit going from area B to area A. And whereas the need in area A is 6 blocks. So that's the need. So there's 2 blocks that are their demand is unmet. And that's the red bar is showing that's the shortfall that area A is experiencing. So that's where it becomes important that there is not only sufficient generation available, but also there is sufficient transfer capability available to be able to import the energy that a particular area may need under certain specific system conditions. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Then, so there's 3 requirements in the legislation. There's study, the part 1 is to calculate the current transfer capability. So that's part 1. That what is the current transfer capability, and then it's not just, we're not interpreting that to mean that the current capability today, but also what is currently planned 10 years out. So we're looking at both of those. And then what are the part 2 is that what are the prudent recommendations for prudent additions to transfer capability? How much transfer capability should be added? To think of the previous example, there were 2 blocks that could have met the need. If we were to add those 2 blocks to the transfer capability, like increase that, then they could have met the need. So what are the recommended prudent additions to transfer capability? So that's the legislation is asking us for that. And then the third thing is that how do we meet and maintain the current transfer capability as well as the prudent additions to transfer capability? The part 1, calculating transfer capability, is not a new thing. It's NERC wrote the guideline for calculating transfer capability, and it's been done regularly by transmission planning entities. Whereas the part 2 is really it's unprecedented. It's new. is, you come up with what should be prudent to add to transfer capability under the system conditions that we intend to study as part of this analysis. We're not looking to recommend specific projects. So, we're not looking to say that, build a 500 kV line from, area A to area B or anything of that nature, or, build, specific generation projects. We are doing more of a broad brush analysis and recommending prudent additions. And how much prudent addition would be beneficial for reliability. So that's, and not how. How do you make it happen? That is, I think will be tackled once we file the report with FERC, and then the transmission planning regions. They look at that recommendations, and then how do they actually make it happen? Which is, again, a big question on its own, but it's beyond the scope of this study. Let's go to the next slide. When we were tasked with this, performing the analysis, the first thing was that, how do we execute the study? So we have an executive leadership team that comprises of executives from NERC as well as the 6 regions. So they're providing the overall guidance to the project. And then there's 4 different, under that umbrella, under the leadership of executive team, 4 different groups that we formed. We have an advisory group that comprises of industry experts from all across the industry, providing us guidance on the study. We've developed the study framework, scoping documents, so we shared those with them. And got their input on that. And then we formed a project team, which is a larger group of NERC and regional entity staff, as well as some of our consultant. And then we subdivided those project team into 3 teams. So one is the transfer study team. They're tackling the part 1, which is calculation of transfer capability. So that's ERO project team, plus we have a consultant, PowerGem, that is helping us with this. And then we have another team, which is prudent additions. So that's parts 2 and 3. That's again, some of the members from ERO project team, plus Telos Energy is our consultant in that. And then we have another smaller team, which is focusing on report writing. Let's go to the next slide. So this is part 1 and 2 objectives. So part 1 is, again, transfer analysis. Part 2 is prudent additions. We are doing both of these parts simultaneously in parallel to each other. And then we intend to bring the 2 together. So for part 1, we're, like I mentioned, we're looking at current and planned transfer capability. That's the objective. We started with FERC order 1,000 regions, but then we decided to subdivide them into smaller regions. We're looking at both, 1 year out and 10 years out. 10 years out because that's kind of the maximum that we can reasonably get the data on from planning entities. Beyond 10 years, it's just, it's a lot of guesswork. So up to, even at 10 years, there's some level of uncertainty that's baked in there. But at least, we have data available. So we wanted to, look at that 10-year outlook and to build, frankly, any, if it ends up being, that new transfer capability has to be added, that, building, anybody that knows transmission planning, building transmission takes a while. So. And then in the transfer analysis, we're looking at summer and winter peak cases. Those are Mod 32. If some of you are familiar with NERC standards, then those are typical models that are representing summer and winter peak conditions are created, and then we calculate the transfer capability on those. The thing with the cases is that the base cases, the models, those models is that it's a single snapshot of the system. But it gives us, the ability to calculate the transfer capability, which is the ask. And then at the end, we get the output is the interregional transfer capability. And then in part two, we need to come up with the recommendations of prudent additions. So part one and part two go hand in hand and in line with each other, in sync with each other. The differences are that the prudent additions, we're also looking at extreme weather. So some of those, extreme weather conditions that we've experienced, which is, we've seen quite a few of those over the last several years. And it's not a single snapshot, it's hourly energy assessment. So looking at all 8760 hours of the year we get a better look at what the energy outlook is for all the different parts of the system. So we calculate hourly energy margins, and then also the prudent additions to transfer capability in that. So let's go to the next slide. These are our sourcing sub-areas. So this is how we have divided the North American system into sub regions. So we call them source in the sense that, generation, where you have generation, sink, where it's generation is going to the sink where we have load. And typically, or each region, they're big regions. So each region could be source in one condition, it could be sink in another condition. So it's going vice versa, both ways, in both directions. We started with FERC order 1000 regions, but then we had to break them down into smaller regions, just because for reliability benefit, it was important to look at that granular look. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to walk through the rest of the slides rather quick in the interest of time. So this slide shows, how we are putting the two pieces together. So the part one, transfer analysis, that gives us the transfer capability. And in part two, we have divided that energy analysis, the prudent additions analysis, into three subcomponents. So there's weather event data set that we're collecting. So that's the first piece, collecting that data or assembling the data, and then performing the energy assessment. And then, from the energy assessment, then we get to the prudent additions. So let's go to the next slide. I'll spend a little bit more time on those. So yeah, this is showing the A2A, if you will, step of calculating or determining the prudent additions to transfer capability. So what we're doing there is that we're creating a time synchronized, consistent data for hourly loads and resources across North America. And we're doing that using both synthetic meteorological data from NREL. We had those 2007 to 2013 years of data there. And then we also are using historical data from EIA from 2019 to 2023. So basically what this is showing is that we have 12 weather years, and we will be running the 10-year out system through 12 different weather years. And so that gives us, 100,000 plus hours of data, hourly data, North America wide, to really look at the energy outlook of the system under various different system conditions. Let's go to the next slide. And then, once we have the data, then we calculate the energy margin. So that's basically the difference between the resource availability within each region relative to the load, and plus some reserve, and factoring weather dependency of load, resources, solar, thermal outages, and it's considered consistently across all regions. We don't want to, this is not a planning reserve margin study based on peak load. We're not doing a full-fledged probabilistic resource adequacy assessment. We're not trying to suggest that a metric designed to replace the local LOLE or other planning criteria. We're not doing that. It's simply a look at the energy of the system, like where's the energy, where's deficiency in the system on an hourly basis, North America wide. Let's go to the next slide. And it's not a production cost model or anything like that. It's essentially a table, if you will, a big database of data. Maybe just scroll one more, and I think it'll show the rest of the slide. Yeah, keep scrolling, like I think 4. Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. So if you look at the box on the left, that's really how we're calculating the energy margin. Available, what is the available wind and solar energy based on historical, seasonal hydro capacity, what is thermal availability based on outages, and after outages, I should say, storage, how much net, storage could be expected both when it's charging and when it's discharging, minus the load, and then a factor. Currently, we are showing a 6%, but that's something that we're still debating internally. Is 6% the right number? But the idea being that there is some level of reserve that we want to see in the margins. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, there you go. So this is an example of a cold snap. So this is basically showing that North America wide. I mean, it's not showing the Canadian system, but you can imagine Canadian system being in there. We look at the maximum daily load. It's showing a 1 week period where we calculate the maximum daily load. And then we look at the average wind and solar capacity factors based on historical. We apply the thermal outage rate to the thermal capacity, and then we get a minimum daily margin for each region that we have selected for the analysis. That may not mean that region is deficient. That just means that region is dependent on imports from the other region. And then we'll look, okay, how much is available around that region. If you look at some of the areas there, they are red, and then their neighbors are also red. So that means that they can't go to them for excess energy. So under these conditions, so we really want to look at, where is the energy available? Where are the green regions? And then is there sufficient transfer capability to get the energy that a particular red area may need? Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, keep going. I mean, so this is showing, the hourly look, across that week, and we can see that, and we'll do that on an hourly basis. So we'll be using that. So, and then, then comes the prudency, the recommendations for prudent additions. What is prudent? Prudent for reliability. That's our focus. I mean, there's other factors like economics and environmental, and there may be other factors in there, and hopefully the final solution combines others. But our swim lane is reliability. So that's what we're focusing on. Let's go to the next slide. And then part 3 of the study is how do we meet and maintain, make recommendations to meet and maintain the transfer capability. So that's the ask from the legislation. So we'll describe, in this portion, a lot of this will be dependent on what we see in parts 1 and 2, but this will be general actions needed to support the transfer capability. If you know that, transfer capability has 2 things. There's transmission, and then there's also the generation. So in some instances, it may be that there might be sufficient transmission, but there may not be generation behind it. Again, we're not talking about specific projects, but that's something that could be part of that meet and maintain. And there may be other enhancement that might be needed, like and some certain market mechanism, some additional analysis will definitely be needed, because this is just our initial look at the North America-wide system. Increasing transfer capability could have multiple solutions, and then those analyses are going to be needed. And then if there's any regulatory, legislative, or standard requirement that may need to be developed, I mean, that's certainly something that we'll have to look at that point. Let's go to the next slide. So this shows the actions that we've completed so far and some of the ongoing activities. A lot of the technical initial scoping and the approach for doing the analysis that has been completed, and it's been vetted with the advisory group. And then now we're in the midst of doing the transfer analysis, energy assessment. Once that's done, then towards the second to third quarter, that's kind of in the June, July timeframe, we'll be looking at the prudent additions. We're also getting help from DOE, national labs. They're also helping us in doing the analysis. So I think that's my last slide, and now I hand over the baton to Gaurav. Gaurav, it's yours.
Thank you, Saad. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Gaurav Karandikar. I'm a senior manager of RAPA and Technical Services at NERC Reliability Corporation. You heard John so eloquently speak about NERC and the ERO enterprise, emphasizing the why and the purpose behind our conducting this study. Saad did a comprehensive overview of the study, objectives, and the project outline, clarifying the what we are doing in performing the study. I will briefly touch upon our approach to how we plan to achieve this objective. Our methodology revolves around inclusivity, transparency, and collaboration. Recognizing the perspective of diverse stakeholders invested in the success of this project. We will prioritize involvement of these stakeholders and how do we disseminate the information. In accordance with the Federal Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, NERC collaborates closely with regional entities and transmitting utilities, fostering engagement both at the national and the regional level. The project team that Saad talked about diligently worked in identifying all potential stakeholders and the various roles these stakeholders will assume for this study. State and provincial policymakers are part of the stakeholder group that NERC and the regions want to keep informed, so all of you can make informed policy decisions. In this study, our role is to collaborate with all identified stakeholders while maintaining independence and focus on reducing the risk to the bulk power system. We remain agnostic regarding the solutions used to address or mitigate this risk. I think that point has been made multiple times, that we are agnostic to the process. Next slide, please. So to ensure ongoing feedback and guidance, we've established ITCS Advisory Committee. You saw the org chart there that Saad shared at the NERC level. And then the level, we have also established ITCS task forces. These committees play a very crucial role in providing insights and recommendations throughout the study duration. Updates to the study status are shared at various different venues at NERC and regional technical committee meetings, board meetings, and various other engagements like this webinar today. So we can plan, we also plan to do a direct communication with the transmission owners, transmission operators, planning coordinators, and transmission planners. Next slide. So in all of this project, communication is going to be the key. The NERC and the ERO communication team has developed a solid communication plan for the project. So I want to thank them for that. Stakeholders can access project updates and provide feedback through our project website, and we have a link for you. And I know we'll be posting these presentations so you can access that link. This website is regularly updated, and the information regarding any open meetings in the future will also be available on this website. We are committed to working closely with you, and if you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to itcs@nerc.net, or you can also contact any of your regional external and legal individuals, particularly for your state. So let's continue this collaboration for the success of the study. With that, I will pass the ball back to Will for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. We've received a couple of questions in the chat, and as a reminder, folks, please feel free to add any other questions to the chat. First question, can NERC explain the difference between transfer capability and the sum of transmission line ratings between regions?
Sure, I can take that one. So when you think of the transfer capability between two regions, you have to, in order to maintain reliability, you not only have to maintain reliability under the conditions that are existing on the grid, but also for the outage conditions. So all the time, you know, the system must remain stable, reliable. If any of the lines individually were to trip, and there's various different reliability criteria that have to be, and stability. You know, thermal is one thing, but then stability is another good piece, important piece of reliability. So you cannot just add the thermal rating of facilities and then call that the transfer capability, because if we did that, that would not be good for reliability. We have to remain reliable for the next possible contingency.
Thank you, Saad. Next question we received. While this discussion is focused on the reliability need for transfer capability, is there an argument that additional transfer capability beyond that needed for simply reliability? Are we thinking too small with this topic and leaving big grid solutions on the table, including transfers that would have been seen as valuable through an economic or public policy lens?
Yeah, I can maybe try to do this one. You know, I think if when you, and Saad mentioned it, you know, when you think about the ultimate solutions, really in anything energy, it's a combination of reliability, economics, and environmental stewardness, and kind of all things around making sure we've got the right mix of all that. And so this is no different. And I think this study, while the reliability lens is incredibly important, it can only be one part of ultimately what that solution will be. And I think what we'll come to find is the reliability challenges that are presenting itself, the types of generation that will be available in the future, where they will be available in the future, are really going to necessitate, I think, large systems to be able to accommodate the variability. And so the reliability goals may very well line up with a lot of the economic goals, the environmental goals, and I think that that's where we want to be ultimately, and make sure we've got the reliability answer, right? Because I don't think we want to do economic things without the reliability. It's so incredibly important because we won't have any economy unless we have that reliability piece solid first.
Thanks, John. I also want to address that we received a question about where this presentation will be posted. And I'll take this opportunity to shamelessly plug NERC's new YouTube page, which is where we will post it for sure. And I am certain we'll post it on our website as well. I actually am going to ask Andrea to ask a couple of questions that I think were sent directly to her. Andrea, do you mind reading the first question?
Sure. Actually, one of the first questions you just asked about where this presentation would be posted. And 1 second. And one of the first questions was the wind drought an isolated event or recurrent?
Oh, I think you were referring to the Dunkelflaut, which is the German word for wind drought. And because, you know, an area like Germany and the operators there are used to seeing these conditions, and so often they've created a word for it. And it's really this lull in wind. And it's something that I think we need to expect. Right now, we're having a lull in solar generation output in California, largely because of the rains over the many weeks, right? So I think it's all about understanding that these conditions happen. They're outliers. They don't happen often, maybe not every year, but we do have to understand that they happen and be prepared for it when they do.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Does the resource mix on slide 8 include Canadian?
This resource, yeah. This is a NERC wide resource mix. Yeah.
Okay, next question regarding slide 14. What were the initial actions completed so far?
Sorry.
Go for it, Todd.
Yeah, what was the question? Sorry, I couldn't hear that very clearly.
Sure. What were the initial actions completed so far?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so if you go to the, I think it's slide 29, I believe. So that shows the completed actions. So we initially started high level framework. And then from that framework, we then developed the scoping documents for parts 1 and part 2. And those were shared with the advisory group and vetted with them, and we got positive feedback. We did get a few things that to think through and make changes or to the approach. So we've gotten that. Regional technical groups have been established. We've selected the software vendor. We've selected the consultants that are helping us. And then so those are the tasks that we've done. And now, you know, we asked for data requests to several of the regions. So they've received the data, some of the data. There's some data that we're still looking at receiving, I think, by the end of next week. So I think we should have all the data by that time. And then really it's at that point is kicking off the analysis at that point. I did see a question that was, I think that's an important question that was asked in the chat. And then that was the you know, with the results of study, we recommended region to region specific transfer capabilities, or do you envision a one size fit all recommended transfer capability? So I think I want to address that one, and John, feel free to add anything. That was one of the first thing that was asked of us, and was some people thought that maybe that one size fit all might be a simpler way to go. Our thinking, and we have also discussed this with our advisory group, I think it's really, we have to do the analysis and see how different regions look like under these stressed conditions, and which regions have surplus, which regions have deficiency. And so you, I mean, my engineering hunch and our as a team, this is our approach, is that our thinking is that the best way to do it is to do the analysis, and then you look at where the capability or proven conditions may be needed compared to the one size fit all.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize if this question is what you just answered, but I don't want to leave anyone out. So this question is for all of the presenters. Given the interconnectivity of the North American grid and the implications that this has for grid reliability, will the ITCS study take into account interconnections with Canada?
Oh, yes, we will. So we, for the study that we are going to be submitting with FERC, we are considering the Canadian system is integrated with the US system at multiple different locations. So a study wouldn't be complete without considering that. So that will definitely be considered. The study that we're going to submit to FERC, that's the deadline on December 2nd. We're going to be reporting the import capability from Canada into the US. But then we also have plans to do the Canadian addendum after that, which is going to calculate the transfer capabilities going the other direction from Canada into US, and then also interprovincial transfer capability as well.
So we are slightly over time here. I want to thank all of our panelists for presenting on our study. And please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We will post this recording there once that's uploaded. And we look forward to hosting future webinars directed towards our state and provincial policymaker audience. So thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you soon.